How you doing, guys? Malik Afram. This is the first chapter of this series is going to be about some of the terminology and anatomy of the knife, so that we're all on the same page when I talk about convex or concave or anything like that. You'll be on the same page as I am with some of these terms. There's all kinds of different knives. This is just a handful of knives from my collection. They all are different. They all need different attention, and they all are really kind of, all of these knives are sharpened slightly different one from the next. The actual anatomy of the knife, how the knife is built, how the knife is ground, how the bevel is cut, the angles at which it's cut, the steels that these are made of, it's a ton of variables, and all of them are important to take into consideration when you go to sharpen a knife. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to clear the desk and we're going to talk about edge geometry. And when I talk about edge, I'm talking about the actual bevel of the knife. This little section right here that's maybe like a 1/16 of an inch or so at the edge, the cutting edge of the knife. The first thing that you have to understand when you go to sharpen a knife is what kind of bevel you're going to put on the knife. Now, there's a handful of different bevels and types. The first most common bevel type everybody is pretty familiar with is, and I'm going to be, this is kind of like a highly zoomed in version, is an angle that comes off the main grind of the knife. This is as basic as it gets. You have this portion right here, which is the grind of the knife, like right here, and then this is cut at an angle that is more obtuse than the grind. So if you were to look, this is an angle, so this right here is one angle, and this right here is one angle. This angle can be anywhere from, I would say, 40 degrees, 45 degrees, all the way down to like really tight, like probably into the teens, 18 degrees, 17 degrees if you're doing something like a straight razor, really sharp, you know, as it comes in, a really steep angle. Basic 50-50 grind is what I call this. 50-50 flat ground. The next style of bevel that we talk about is a convex grind. Now, the convex grind can apply to, again, the grind face of the knife and the bevel. And what we're talking about here is if we had a flat ground knife, flat, with a convex grind. So this is a curve, and this is a curve. Sometimes this is called an appleseed grind. This is not flat. This is radiused, so it comes in straight and it radiuses out. Convex grind. The next style of grind would be called a concaved grind. Now that is exaggerated, but again, this is radiused inward, this is radiused outward. Then you have something what we call a chisel grind, where basically one side of the knife is flat, the other side is ground flat, and then there is a bevel put on the knife. Okay, so a chisel grind, concave, convex, flat grind. Now that is very basic. Now there's all kinds of combinations of this that can be done. For example, you can have a chisel grind with a concaved face. You can have an asymmetrical faceted grind. This is what we call a 50-50. A lot of Japanese knives come 70-30, so it's a 70-30. So it's an asymmetrical 70-30. You can do you know, a multiple beveled knife, a multi-bevel knife, or a micro bevel. A lot of times what guys will do is they'll take the knife, you know, your basic grind, they'll cut kind of a steep facet to the grind, and then they'll come back here and they'll micro bevel just at the very tip, a little tiny bevel. So there's actually 1-2 bevel faces on the knife. You can do a convex micro bevel, so you can mix and match these different styles of edge. You know, there's another type of knife that's not nearly as common, it's extremely difficult to sharpen. a really high level, what we call a zero grind. And a zero grind knife is where the bevel of the knife, the whole grind goes from way back here all the way to the edge. All the way. It's like one continuous face. Traditional Japanese samurai swords, katanas, wakizashis like that are a zero grind with a bit of a convex to them. They actually, so it's just like a big, gentle, sloping, cutting edge as it comes in like that. Really beautiful when it's done properly. There's no bevel at the edge. The whole face of the knife just comes off into infinity. I think it's really a good looking if it's done properly, but very rarely is it done properly. This style right here really is only made mechanically, generally to get a concaved cutting edge. There's a machinery that basically what it does is it's like two opposing wheels that rotate, and the knife is drawn through right here. And as you can see, is if you're that face right here, as you bring the knife edge into that, you would make a dual concave grind. Not very common, normally mechanically cut and not on any kind of hand sharpening equipment can you get this style of. I'm going to touch for a moment on grit or coarseness of a stone. The grit that I'm going to refer to throughout this series is going to be basically like the American grit system. There's other numbering systems, but the American grit system goes, the smaller the number, the grittier the stone, which means the smaller the number, like this is a 500 grit stone, has an average 29.4 micron particle. So the bigger the particle, the grittier the stone. The smaller the number, the grittier the stone. So we go like the 500 would be coarse, the 1000 would be medium, the 4000 would be fine, the 8000 would be extra fine. General terms, fine, extra fine. These are a little more scientific terms, the actual numbering of the stone. Now, why do we need so many stones and grit patterns? Most sharpening systems come with multiple grit patterns. They don't have just one stone that does everything. The coarser the stone, the faster the material is going to be removed. So we really use like the 500 grit or whatever is on the lowest end of the spectrum grit-wise for the workhorse stone. It's going to be the grit that gets all the work done. That's going to remove the metal and set the bevel. Once we get the bevel set, everything above that is refining the scratch pattern. When we refine the scratch pattern, we're not trying to hog off tons of metal. What we're trying to do is take that scratch surface and make it shinier and shinier and shinier and shinier until we get to the level that we want. So to get to something like this, that's like literally like mirror polished, you have to work up the grits in a controlled, thought out manner. My basic grit progression goes in a doubling manner. So with Japanese water stones like this, I go 500, double to 1000. I skip the 2000 and go to the 4000, and then 4000 I jump to 8000. And if I really want the presentation quality edge, I would go from an 8000 to a 16,000 grit. That grit progression gives me basically a mirror polished edge after I'm done stropping. So if you're trying to get as fine an edge as possible, I normally say set your bevel somewhere around on a 100 to 500 grit stone, depending on the system. With the Wicked Edge, I actually start at 100. I do 100, 200, 400, 600, 800, 1000. And it's not quite a doubling pattern, but that's how the Wicked Edge stones come. And they're a little different than Japanese water stones. But again, with Japanese water stones, I would go 500, 1000, 4000, 8000, 16,000. It's kind of a